When I started as a UX research intern, I met this designer who said, Joe, if you want to understand people's behavior, you need to know three things about them. What's going to get them hired, fired, or promoted in their job. And that was like really good advice. It didn't help with everything, but it helped quite a bit to have like a little framework, a little thing, a little tool that I could use. And I started thinking about, what do I wish somebody would have just told me? Once I started working full-time as a researcher, what do I wish somebody would have just sat down and made super plain and clear to me? And so that's my attempt here. My attempt here is to share some of my thoughts, what I wish somebody would have just told me. This is probably helpful for somebody just starting out their career in UX research. But if you've been around a while, maybe it causes you to think in a new way or teaches you something new too. So check it out. Let me know what you think. See ya. Alrighty, let's see if we might be able to draw out some of these ideas I'm going to talk about. So if you work at a software company, regardless of what you're doing on the product team, I think it's very important to remember that what you are creating are features. So we're creating features. It doesn't matter that you're a researcher. This is what the team is trying to produce. And you can almost think of the product team as almost like a factory, right? So we got our smokestack with some smoke, and it's important to have some windows so we have some natural lighting. So people are happy in the factory. We got some inputs coming in, and we are shipping features. These are our features. They're going out. This is what people are getting and what they're using. Now, this is important. If you take this analogy a little farther, you might actually think of the different roles of a product team as being machinery in that factory. And engineers are going to be the most expensive machinery in that factory. That is why it is very, very bad if for any reason their pipeline stops. If they don't have something to build, that's a big sin, because you do not want your most expensive machinery laying idle. It's just really not a good way to run a factory. And that might actually explain to you why you might have an idea. Like, let's say you notice that something's not quite working well. You don't have alternative ideas, but it seems like people are ignoring you. That's because the machine isn't going to just sit idle. It's going to need something alternative, a much better idea to be producing. And that'll actually start to explain some of the problems you'll probably hit. But features is what, if you're working on a team, you're responsible for. Now, as researchers, we don't create features. We don't code. There are some who can code, but in general, researchers don't code. What we do is we collect data, right? So we got over here, we got some data. All right. We have a gap. Data, eventually, it doesn't become features. You have to transform it in some way. You need to close this gap. You need to take data and somehow turn it into features. And the way you do that is you first take data, and from there, you need to turn them into insights. Insights is just a really fancy word for meaning. What that just means is you can't just dump data from your studies on a product team and expect them to know what to do. You have to explain the significance of that. What does it mean? What should they do with that information? What should change? And, you probably have witnessed maybe the researcher who just does a data dump. That might happen a little bit earlier in people's careers. They just kind of share all the data. But what does it mean? Right? If you could synthesize this to like one big idea or two big ideas, what's important here? What should I be taking away from this? What should I do with that? That's where insights come into play. Now, at this point, you actually have enough to bridge this gap. And some of our really good partners like data science, this is essentially their workflow. They have data. From the data, they produce insights or meaning. And then from there, they can start to get to feature building. So you might actually see something like this. This is data science. My other analysts, other different roles might do this. But for research, we have one more step. And the clue is actually in our name, user experience research, experience. And this is actually our noble calling here. I'm just going to write experiences. we know that basically you can't just stack feature upon feature upon feature and that it be valuable to people. We know that that can lead to confusion. We know that that can lead to being overwhelmed with too many options or too many choices. And really, what we want to strive for, the North Star as a user experience researcher, you want to strive for, is on defining a new experience. It's almost like you see everything as a system, and then you figure out, how does this system work together? And ultimately, what is the new experience somebody should have because of the features? And then from there, once you actually know what the experiences are, you reverse engineer your features, right? If you do this, this will stop the problem of basically coming up with features and then coming up with a solution, trying to figure out who wants it, who will value it. And everybody's been there, and it's a huge headache. When people just do what is possible or does what's convenient or does what they can get out the door, but nobody actually wants that stuff. It doesn't solve a real problem for people. And so this is what I wish somebody would have sat me down when I first started user experience research and explained to me. They would have explained to me, look, your job is you're going to go and you're ultimately going to have to help the team make features. Your job isn't done until you've helped the team make features. It's not done just because you ran a study and you collected some good data and it was a great study design. That's not enough. It's not enough just because you explain to people the meaning of that data or that you could even dream up experiences. Ultimately, you have to take it all the way through this path. And then this is how you have product impact. Okay. So I want to do a little side. Let's do a little side thing for PMs, because I think it's important to understand PMs. And this is going to be really reductive. This is, PMs do a million different things. This is super, super reductive, but it's all going to connect. Okay. So I'm going to use my blue marker for this one. Okay. As it pertains to what we were just talking about, really, if I had to simplify what a PM is doing, they're first identifying features. And then they actually have to prioritize, because product teams don't have an infinite number of people to work on problems. They don't have an infinite number of time. You have to say, okay, out of all these things that we can do, these are the most important areas that we spend our energy. So they're going to prioritize. And then, you basically have to kind of come up with a timeline. Okay, who's going to work on what and when? You need some way to somehow sequence it. You'll start to have conversations about how some of these might actually be sequenced, because there could be dependencies. You might require some work is done before other work. We could just broadly call that sequencing. And then ultimately, at the end, once you've kind of come up with this and this, which another word for this is like, this is your roadmap. It's your product roadmap. So basically, once you've come up with this, you got to execute. So PMs are likely taking the plans that they worked with the team on what are we going to build, how are we going to do it, at what time are we going to do it, and they're going to get feedback from leadership. They might change a little bit based off that feedback. But ultimately, at some point, they're going to lock in their roadmap, and now their job is to execute, which basically means get what you promised that you said you were going to do, which you're going to prioritize and how you're going to sequence it, and the milestones you said you're going to hit, and do that. Okay, so let's go back here. Okay, so let's put this together, okay? So remember we had this. We had researcher comes up with data. They turn these into insights. From here, you work with the team to actually come up on what the new experience should look like, and then you reverse engineer. If we were going to do this new experience, what are the features that we need? And it's very easy to think that it's almost like a continuation. Okay, now we have features. We're going to identify those features, and then we're going to prioritize and sequence them and then execute. That's not what happens. If you're working with a product manager, you actually are going to need to overlap much farther in the future some of these things. So if I do this here, what you're going to see is that probably somewhere around here in the experiences bucket, this is probably where prioritization is going to happen. Why? Because good PMs are not only thinking about just the features that they can ship. A lot of times they're actually thinking about the strategy or where they want a product to go. And so maybe a certain user problem they really want to focus on, or a certain market that they're trying to all of a sudden, maybe increase market coverage for. So what you're going to see is you're going to actually see and hear, and there should be discussions about prioritization here, because you cannot, as a researcher, just dream up, oh, this should be the experience. It might not have any overlap with already the prioritized experiences that the team is thinking about. So somewhere here, prioritization is happening. And again, once you have agreed on like these are the big areas that we really want to prioritize, then you're likely going to go into sequencing somewhere here. And you could go into cycles of this. You can go into cycles of prioritization and sequencing. So how is any of this helpful? Especially like if I'm a researcher, right? How is any of this helpful? One of the big problems that you have as a researcher is if you don't understand that this is kind of how work happens, or if I was going to draw this another way, it might look something like this. I've designed my study. I'm going to recruit my participants. I'm going to do the interviewing. Let's say you're a qual researcher, you're going to interview. I'm going to write a report, and then I'm going to share out my study, and I'm done. No, you're not done. This is what most researchers think when they start out is the work involved in research. This is a lot more what the work looks like. And so, okay, if you're actually going to share this out, what do you probably need to do? Well, I might need to run a workshop. Why would you need to run a workshop? Well, if we look back here at the experiences, I as a researcher might not completely know what that new experience should look like. And I have to rely on my other partners like product design, content strategy, engineers on how that whole system comes together. And so very likely in this stage experiences, I'm going to be leaning on those other roles, and we're probably going to have to do some kind of activity because they don't likely know it. They're probably going to have to learn about the meeting, and they're going to have to get information about what the problems are, and then have some kind of like a brainstorm to actually figure out, or a working session to figure out what should those experiences be. And that's where a lot of debates will happen. You'll start to get into prioritization, but at the very least, this is very likely where I need to bring in other people. If I don't know that, then when I'm creating my schedule of everything I'm doing for the half, I don't know that, oh, this study is likely going to have a workshop because I don't think I'm going to be able to come up with the experiences by myself. And especially where I have the confidence that it's going to be prioritized out of already what the team is working on and prioritizing to do. This also points out the fact that you need to know how prioritization works at your company and how decisions are made. What is convincing? Especially if you want to change the direction, they're probably going to want to see quite a bit of quant data to support it beyond just a couple qual studies. And so understanding that even if I can get a workshop together to come up with the ideas of the new experiences, it's likely not going to get into the roadmap unless we actually prioritize it. And what does that process look like? And then even sequencing. And so very early on then, if I'm doing a study, and I'm back here, I might actually realize, okay, these are the these are the features that short term I think can actually be done this half, because it already jives with what we're doing. It's not really going to disrupt timelines. We can still actually get it done. And then these are really other candidates for features that you're going to get in the long term. So features that you're going to actually try to bring maybe in the next half's roadmap. Okay. So as a researcher, let's say you have a problem. A problem might be you're not having the product impact. You can start to understand how all of this works together and the pieces that you're going to have to do in order to do that. Something I like to tell people is to create a hit list. What's a hit list? A hit list is basically once you finish a study, on the very last slide of the study, you say, what action do you want people to take and who? Very specifically who. So my product manager, Jeff. I want my product manager to have this conversation with leads. Or I want to investigate how much time it would actually take if we wanted to create this new module. And so I'm going to talk to Eng leads on this one. It's to have very concrete things to shoot for. That will start to poke holes and make you realize, oh, wait a minute, I don't, for example, understand what the experience is, so I need to do something that's more collaborative to actually figure out what that is. So a hit list is an example of something that I like to use. The way that something like this can be used by managers is that it's very easy for a manager to basically go and, like, let's say they're trying to diagnose, okay, why is somebody not having product impact? And they're probably going to go over here. They're probably going to go over here to the data or the study design and micromanage. They're going to jump into this, micromanage, and it's not going to help you have impact. Why? Because the problem was never over here. The problem was either likely you weren't making it clear what this meant to individuals, or you weren't figuring out how to craft this, eventually synthesize this into a new experience, a Delta new experience that people should actually have. And, you know, if you understand that part of this has to do with prioritization and sequencing, you as a manager might realize, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, the problem got all the way to prioritization, but then it died there. I, as a manager, might have to work with the other leads. There might be some work that I need to do to help my teammates be more successful so that they can actually push something through. So anyways, this is something that I really wish somebody would have just explained plainly to me. I hope this helps. And leave a comment. Let me know what you guys think. See ya.